Hello, and welcome to Elantum Digital's Publishing by the Numbers, where we help authors and self-publishers create quality books and build successful self-publishing businesses.
Hi, guys. Welcome to the Publishing by the Numbers podcast. I am Janet S. Brown, and today I'm here with my two fabulous co-hosts, Virginie Anderson. Hi, Virginie.
Hello.
And CJ Anaya. Hi, CJ.
Hello.
And today we are on podcast episode number 10. Last week we talked to you about editing and defined some of the basics of editing. And today we have our special guest, Cori Rupe, who is a professional editor who is going to talk to us today a little bit about a kind of day in the life of an editor, things that she does, what's it really like behind the scenes. And we will throw questions at her rapid fire and see what she comes up with, because that's the way we roll, and it's lots of fun. So to lead into this, we're going to go through Cori's background here. So Cori Rupe is an editor and published poet who is currently working on a historical fiction novel set in the Appalachian Mountains. She lives in West Virginia in a strange little cabin in the woods with her fiance, 3 dogs, and a never-ending series of wildlife visitors. Her poetry has recently been featured in, is it Lupercalia? Am I saying that right, Cori? Lupercalia Press and the Screen Door Review. And you can find her on LinkedIn, Facebook, and on Instagram under the handle CYR. See, I'm old, guys. The glasses, I have to make it really big. CYR Writes. Welcome, Cori. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, guys. Thank you for having me.
This was our kind of really, really formal introduction. So there were fun things in there that you should tell us a little bit more about. Why do you have a never-ending series of wildlife visitors?
Well, because my fiance and I bought a cabin in the woods last year, but this cabin had been abandoned for 6 years before we bought it, and the wildlife moved in. We kicked most of it out, but we're still having several battles. Right now, we're fighting ladybugs and wasps. We have a steady stream of lizards and occasionally a snake that comes in. The rest of the wildlife lives outside, but it does come to visit. Right now, deer are eating our old jack-o'-lanterns.
So this episode is really worth watching on YouTube if you have the opportunity, because we might see Cori in action live. We might or we might not, but
fighting wasps and having staring contests with lizards in the wall. That could be really exciting.
Yeah, there are currently ladybugs of biblical proportions trying to make it into the cabin, and we do this every single fall. But you know what? We're going to make it through. It's going to be great.
Yeah, ladybugs is a new one on me. I've never had a ladybug invasion. That's kind of cool and a little creepy.
I will tell you, if you call an exterminator, they will laugh at you and say, you just have one. Apparently, there's nothing in the world that will stop ladybugs.
Or they just look at that and go, yeah, that's a new one. We don't usually have people calling us about ladybugs. That doesn't happen.
Oh, in Appalachia, apparently people call all the time, and exterminators just throw their hands up and go, it is what it is. Enjoy. And we wait for our plague of locust ladybugs to come in, and we vacuum them up literally midair.
Nice. Very nice.
I love it.
All right, let's shift a little bit towards our focus here. So you're a professional editor. Give us some background there. How did you come into this profession? Was insanity involved? Why did you decide that you wanted to work with authors and help them make their projects bright and shiny?
Well, I would say that insanity has to be involved the second you go to school for writing. You have to automatically be insane. So I went straight to college from high school. I went to Hollins University in Roanoke, Virginia. I studied English literature with a concentration in creative writing. And while I was working on that concentration, I fell in love with memoir. It's my absolute favorite thing in the entire universe. I would love to edit it every single day. And what I love about editing, specifically memoir, it has branched out into other genres, is that you can help people who have an incredible story, even if they don't have the writing skills to equate that story to paper. And so when you have that ability, you're able to get everyone's story out, because everybody has a story to tell. Whether that be fiction, nonfiction, I think that editing is a really great profession because not only do you get to work with incredible people with incredible stories, but you get to help them polish their work to be the best it can be.
When it comes to just your editing process, and you getting into this, do you remember the first job that you had as an editor that kind of propelled you or launched you into this world of editing memoirs or editing anything really? Like what got you started there?
Well, actually, so I think that if you really break it down, I started editing in school when I was doing workshopping. Because, with creative writing courses, you always have to workshop each other's work. And so that's really where editing gets built. You start building those skills. And then, just to be extra classy, I started freelancing after college and writing some papers for some people. I got paid to write a lot of academic papers. And that kind of bloomed into editing because I started working on people's papers they had written. And then I ended up actually out of the blue working with a Food Network personality. I don't know how it happened. It was crazy. And actually his book is coming out next year. I cannot tell you what I did for that because I have signed an NDA, but I am credited in the back as a contributor of some sort. So when I got the Food Network guy, I thought, why am I not doing this full time? And so that's when I started. I went from editing part-time to, hey, I'm going to quit my job and become a freelancer. And I ended up being able to fully support myself and actually triple my yearly salary within 1 year. So it was awesome.
What is your ideal client?
Oh, my ideal client is somebody with unlimited funds for editing first. Okay. Not because I want to charge them unlimited amounts of money, but because I want to work with them so deeply. My favorite client of all time actually would sit and have phone calls with me while I just typed notes, like I was a court stenographer or something like that. And after we would get off the phone, I would take her manuscript and then I would take my notes and write it and bring it all together. And that's not something that's cheap. So that's why I say unlimited money. But my favorite client is somebody who is willing to tell me their story, work with me so that I can understand where they're coming from. As an editor, you can't work on memoir or even a lot of nonfiction because nonfiction so often it involves personal stories. And you can't really work on those stories if you don't have a feel for the client. I've worked on manuscripts that have been dumped on my desk, and those are fine. But it's much more fun when you get to have that interpersonal relationship where you really understand where they're coming from.
Right. So then the other side of the coin is what kind of client you would never work with, even though they have unlimited funds.
Oh,
no
the
names.
Client. Okay. Oh, no names. The client I would never work with, even though they have unlimited funds, is the client who immediately messages me with unreasonable demands, absolutely no hellos, how are yous, because I am Southern and we are all about Southern hospitality. You start a conversation by asking, how are you? And says basically, I want you to ghostwrite my book. You hear that a lot as an editor. I'm not a ghostwriter. If I wanted to be a ghostwriter, I would ghostwrite. And so people who aren't willing to work with you at all, I'm not willing to work with them.
How do you just take me through a typical day? How do you do you have like a fixed time where that's all what you do editing, or do you have, I know a little bit about your working hours, which by the way, everyone, it's not the norm. It's not the norm. It's not. Cori is, so there's a night owl. And
Cori is a vampire, and
yes.
I am privileged to know her. God, I just love it. I'm convinced that she is a vampire who is just ruling the night with her quill and pen. This is how I visualize this. But yeah, she's fabulous. I just love this.
Yep.
So showing up in CJ's next book. Her next vampire romance is going to be set in, the hills of Appalachia and.
Yeah. So what do you do, like editing only in the morning? Because I know that you're also writing your own novel. Like, do you like have a fixed time? How does it work?
Well, when I'm asleep and dreaming, I have a fixed editing schedule and my whole life is put together. But when I wake up, reality hits, and I do not live that way at all. Um, my goal is to edit in the morning. My morning, by the way, starts at about 2 p.m. But that happens about once or twice a month. Usually what happens is I go out into the world, I do the things I need to do. I realize, oh no, we're out of this, so I go to the store. I realize, oh, I got to call this person to pay a bill, so I do that. I usually end up watching a couple episodes of Grace and Frankie to calm down from social interaction because that's rough. And then whatever time it may be in between my, interactions with clients and everybody's fed and the dishes are done, I will sit down at my computer. And I would like to say that I edit from 10 p.m. to midnight, but really I edit when my day is done and I go to bed when editing is done, which leaves me in a chaotic schedule every second of my life.
That's a good summary. Every second of like, okay, so obviously when you're a writer, the especially when you do creative writing, the process is very creative, as the name says. How much of it as when you're editor, how much of creativity is involved and how much of technical skills are involved?
It really depends on which type of editing you specialize in, because not all editors do all types of editing. For example, I do everything just because I'm a jack of all trades and I stay up all night, so why not? But when it comes to developmental editors and line editors, there's a lot of creativity involved. When it comes to copy editing, it's less creative. It's more by the book. My favorite type of editing is line editing, which is super strange for an editor because that always gets absorbed into another type of editing. So it's like you like the one that doesn't really count, I guess. It does have its value. It has its value. But I really enjoy line editing because I like to look at a sentence, deconstruct it in its entirety, figure out why it's there, what its intention is, and try to get in the headspace of the author, because my voice doesn't matter. That's not what I do as an editor. My job is to figure out what the author is trying to say and say it in their tone in the most poetic way possible, really. So there's a lot of creativity involved in certain types, and in other types, it's kind of like being an accountant, but for words.
Yeah. Right, because we on the previous episode we talked about that, right? We talk about how do you know if a editor is good? And one of the things we said that is an editor is not there to change your voice. If your voice is buried under what the editors want, that's not what you want from an editor. How do you balance this, your own voice, your own personality with the personality and the voice of the author, and make everything work?
So it's actually weirdly an empathetic thing to do. I work mostly in nonfiction, and so when it comes to editing, like I said, I really prefer to speak to my clients before I start editing and get to know them. And it's kind of like a little ego death. You just kind of shut you up and you try to see the world through their perspective and through their voice. And I really pay attention to the words they say, their dialect. If you are in a different country than I am, my tone isn't going to work. My dialect isn't going to work. I need to pay attention to what you are and where you're from. So it's really just about shutting off a part of you to try to stand in somebody else's shoes.
I know this is not maybe exactly relevant to editing, but because you mentioned that you're also writing your own novel, when it comes to the editing phase, what are you going to do?
Cry. I have a big team of editors around me that I know just from professional work. And so they're going to get boxes of cookies and long pleading messages for beta reads. I'm not going to ask anybody to edit my book for free or anything, but I am going to be like, do you want a beta read in exchange for cookies? And I hope that some people will agree. And then I'll hire out an editor, because while self-editing is a thing, and I will self-edit multiple times before I send my manuscript off to other people, it is never replaceable with professional editing. Professional editing has to be done by somebody else because you have to get out of your own headspace. What I'm writing right now, I'm so close to it that I won't be able to step back and see the things that don't make sense or that are contradictory or just plain bad. And so I'll need to send it to someone else.
So by the way, guys, if you're listening to this, those questions are not prepped in advance, and Cori does not know what we're going to ask her. So just to illustrate that, our previous episode, because we did an episode on self-publishing and we did an episode on introduction to professional editing. And what you just said there is exactly, we're on the same page. So self-editing is important because you want to provide the best copy that you can so that the professional can go in and polish it further. It's a non-negotiable. You cannot not get an editor to review your book. It's just so fundamental. It's so important. And we said that, you already spend a lot of time or maybe money on the manuscript. So this is that kind of last 40%, 30% that will bring things home. So it will be like, halfway through, it would be like me halfway through my croissant. And then I'm like, no, that never happens. We need to go through the finish line, and I want to make it worthwhile. So I'm willing to go to that extra further away bakery where I know their croissant is really good. I'm willing to go and get up earlier because I know the result will be good. It's the same thing. You already put a lot of effort. You already jumped in your car to get that bloody croissant. So you might as well just do that extra miles and get that croissant. Croissant will be a constant theme coming up all the time. I'm even surprised it hasn't come up earlier.
All I'm hearing is that you're comparing Cori to croissants because that's how good her editing is. And so everyone needs to go the extra mile and hire her because she is the croissant of editing. Is that what we're getting here?
So croissant, it sounds maybe like an easy thing, but master a good croissant, it's a work of art, and only masters can do that well. So
yeah,
it takes all day to make croissants. It's fun, but it takes a long time.
It's a big compliment coming from me because I'm very, very picky with my croissant. So Cori basically is a good croissant. It's a great croissant. So just
that is the most flattering thing anyone has ever said about me, and I appreciate it.
There you go.
All
right. So something that I know from looking at your background information is that you have worked as an editor with an agency before. And that's kind of a different experience than either CJ and I have had, because we've both been freelance editors, but we've never worked really in that kind of agency structure. So maybe give our listeners a little bit of a peek behind the scenes of if they go to an editing agency, which last week we gave them some ideas of various agencies they might want to try. How does an agency work that is different than, hey, come hire you individually?
That's actually a really good question. And the first thing I want to say is beware. There are incredible editing agencies in the world, but with the rise of indie publishing has come the rise of people who want to take advantage of indie publishers. So please do thorough research on everyone that you end up working with. But with an agency, there's usually a team of editors rather than one. So my experience at an agency is that there are editors who do the first pass, editors who do the second pass, sometimes a third pass, depending on the shape of the manuscript when they get it. Then it gets sent off for proofreads, formatting. Sometimes proof copy edits are done, which is where you get a copy of the book before it's ready to be released. And you go through, do one more round of edits, and you update the formatting and all that jazz. I really like editing agencies. I like working in them, honestly, because there's never something that's going to be missed when it comes to the way the plot works and the way the story is structured. You know, my opinion and Jana's opinion and CJ's opinion as editors will all vary. We'll catch a lot of the same things, But at one point, CJ might say, I really think that we need to hit this point or we need to expand here. And I wouldn't have thought that because we're different people. And with every editor you're working with, you're getting a different perspective. So I like agencies. I think they're really useful. They give you so many perspectives to look at your work and choose which ones you want to go after.
It's really good you said that, Cori, just because guys, don't forget that Elantum Digital offers editing services. By the way, just shamelessly promoting the company. But we'll talk about that in another episode. But just that one. Yeah.
It does happen. So does that mean an agency takes a lot longer? I mean, you're getting a lot more things out of it, but what does that do to things like how long it takes? What kind of very, very ballpark costs are you talking about? Because I think that we talked a little bit about some of the pricing stuff for freelancers when you do Upwork, when you do an individual, but when you're talking about that, sending out for formatting, multiple passes, that's a lot of work going in there. So what does that do as far as timeframes and expenses?
So different agencies offer different levels of service. I'll go ahead and say that. But when you have that level of passes that are happening, you do pay for it. You're paying for a lot of time. Editing, like making good croissants, takes at least a whole day, usually a lot longer. So when you're talking about cost and time, agencies definitely take longer. I have seen agencies take several months for a manuscript. These agencies are working with authors usually, in the sense that they will do a pass, they will send it back to the author. The author will send it back, another pass will happen, and we're going back and forth. What really takes the longest is when an author doesn't meet their deadline, because agencies are very strict with their deadlines. If they say, I'm going to have it to you in 2 weeks, they have it to you in 2 weeks. That is their reputation, it's their business, it's how they put food on the table. What I've noticed is that a lot of authors feel intimidated by that, and they'll go, I'll look at it. And then 4 months later, they email you and go, I'm sorry, I haven't gotten back to you. Because they see the red ink and what I call it the bloodbath, because the first pass of a manuscript always bleeds. It looks so bloody in the red ink. And that's okay. Every single manuscript does that. Stephen King's manuscripts look like that. It's not a bad thing to have a bloody first pass.
Very appropriate for Stephen King.
Yeah, exactly.
Have a bloodbath in his manuscript.
Exactly. The first draft should bleed of every manuscript. And so I really try to tell all of my authors, it's okay. Please don't be afraid of all the red you're about to see. It happens to everybody. It's going to happen to me when I send my manuscript out. But people get intimidated by that and they take forever to come back because they're nervous. And that's what really takes the longest in an agency. When you work with an individual freelancer, things will move much more quickly, mostly because they have to turn out projects pretty fast to keep their livelihood going. And also, a freelancer has 1, 2, maybe 5 projects on their plate at a time. A freelancer who has 20 projects editing is either insane or not doing a very thorough job. So they can move a lot faster. Agencies usually have quite a few manuscripts on their plate at once.
Yeah, and then the other potential risk with just a freelancer that you never heard of or anything is you have no idea if they're, if they don't have any sample, if they don't have any history of their like track record of their past works. It's you're taking a chance on that person. Whereas I'm not saying that all the agencies are doing a great job, but at least within our agency, we won't take on any editors who are not professional editors who have really long track record of doing that. This is kind of, I mean, this is how we do things with, in our company. But when you just going, say, on Upwork, for example, and you go look for a freelancer, who knows?
You have the extra safety net when you work with an agency because things happen, life happens. And when you work with a freelancer, all of your hopes and dreams are resting on one person. And if they get sick or they have a family tragedy, it can be really rough. You're stuck. You just have to wait, especially if they have your manuscript and it's halfway done. What are you going to do? When you have an agency, there's always a backup team to get things done in time. And that can be very comforting as both a client and an editor who works in an agency.
That kind of speaks to the question that I was going to ask with, the difference between working on a freelance site as a freelancer, just you yourself doing it and running the show, as opposed to the agency. Have you found what do you like better? Do you enjoy, or did you enjoy working for that agency, or was it, what do you like about just going solo on that?
I really enjoyed working in an agency mostly because of the people. When you live in the middle of the woods in a cabin, you don't hang out much with others. So it was nice to have that social interaction. It was also nice to have a set schedule of you will be at your computer from this time to this time. As we mentioned, my life is chaotic and I just kind of do things when I have time throughout the day. At the same time, I really, really love working for myself. I don't know that I could ever give up that entrepreneurial spirit of having a say in what happens, And so I prefer freelancing. I will say that you're never off work. I mean, I used to log off Friday at 5 and then not thinking about it at all until Monday at 8. And now I think about it when I'm in the shower, when I'm going to sleep, while I'm cooking dinner. And when I think, oh, I'm going to take a week off, my brain just explodes and goes, How are you going to do that? Who's going to do your work? Are you just going to email all your clients and go, I'm done for a week? No, you have to show up all the time. But I think that's true for owning any business. So when you're a freelancer, you are your own business. It's just you.
We mentioned on the previous episode something about editorial assessment. Can you maybe talk a little bit about that? How you review some of those things and the process from there?
Yeah. So this is kind of irrelevant to most people, but I will tell you the very first thing I do when I get a manuscript is change the font and spacing and size. And I'll just tell all of the authors and publishers out there, don't be mad at your editor for changing your fonts when they're editing, because editing in Calibri 11 point is maddening. It makes me insane. I hate it with a burning passion. And so the first thing I do for me is I change everything to Georgia 14, no matter what. That's how I read best. I usually double space. And when I send it back to the client and they'll send it back to me in Calibri 11, it's like a little mini battle that we both don't talk about. And we'll just keep sending it back passive aggressively. But it's fine. I think it's one of the spicy
I had a
parts of
client who
editing.
sent me everything in 19 point.
Oh,
whoa.
It was huge because he was old and he couldn't read anything. And so I would shrink it down to something I could work on. And when I got the manuscript back, every time he had blown it back up to 19 point font. So I'm right there with you. The font size that you edit under is not necessarily the same one that people want to type under.
Yep. It's ridiculous. I can't do Calibri 11 point. Like when I see it, I have a visceral reaction. So I have to change it. I think it's from having seen it so many times. But anyway, so when I get a manuscript, the first thing I do is I always clarify expectations with the author, because I don't want to overbill them. I don't want to underbill them. I don't want to, have miscommunications. I think that the biggest issue between freelancers and clients is not setting expectations from the beginning. And that is always my main goal. So if they want me to do an editorial assessment, what that means is essentially I would go over the manuscript and get a sense of the general health of the manuscript so that I could make editing recommendations. I'm not actually editing anything. So at that point, I read it, I make notes to myself, I make notes in the margin, and I really note, am I bored? Which most people hear that and they go, but it's okay, it's important. I have to do that as an editor. My job is to tell you if I'm bored and when and where and why and what I think you can do to improve it. So the first thing I ask is, am I bored? The second is, have I read this multiple times? If I'm rereading paragraphs, there's an issue because I can't grasp it all in one time, or my brain wanders or something like that occurs. So I take notes of that. I also take notes of tone, pacing, tense shifts, that kind of thing, point of view shifts. And at the end of it, I will write like a 2-page letter explaining, hey, these are the big issues I'm seeing. These are my editing recommendations. I really like doing editorial assessments because they're kind of low pressure when it comes to send back something perfect, because I'm not actually making any changes at that point. But it also makes me mildly insane because it's so hard as an editor to read a manuscript and not change things. It's counterintuitive. I don't like that part.
Right. Okay. All right. So how do you I know it depends on the editors and it depends the price that you agreed on. What's the normal kind of revision round? Like, do you do like just I'm asking you to do a line editing, and do you do like offer revisions? And if you do, how many? Like, where do we draw the line? Because we all had clients who are just they can't let it go. At some point, we need to draw that line, right? And how do you manage that kind of, backwards, forwards kind of exchange?
A lot of it comes from setting expectations in the beginning. I usually offer 2 revisions. My preference is to do a full developmental line and copy and then send them elsewhere for proofreading. The reason I send people elsewhere for proofreading is not because I can't do it. It's because if I am the one editing your manuscript, you need a proofreader to be a different person. Your proofreader should always be someone who has never seen your manuscript before, because by the time I'm done editing your manuscript, I'm also very familiar with it. And so I may miss things when it comes to grammar and spelling. But what I will do is essentially we'll do a developmental edit. I'll send it back to the author and have them fix those things that we've mentioned in developmental editing. At which point I will go back through, do a line and copy edit. I combine those 2. And if I see any issues that have been missed, I will send it back to the author. And that's when I give them a chance for a revision if they find some issues that they're not happy with. And I mean, I do 1 to 2 revisions depending on the size of the project and the health of the manuscript in the beginning. But it's something that you can bring to your editor and say, I think that I need this many. You definitely want them to be able to revise it if something is wrong or your ghostwriter has questions, or if you as the author have questions that have not been addressed.
How do you do your fact check? Or like, do you actually offer fact check? And if you do, how do you do them?
So I offer mild fact checking. I'm not a fact checker. That is actually an entirely different job within the publishing sphere. But I do offer fact checking. I will check your citations and your references, and then I will check the validity of those citations if I'm concerned about something. Like if I find out you're on Snopes or Wikipedia, obviously I'm going to go, no, we need to find a different source. The internet, though, has become a really sketchy way to check facts. And you wouldn't think it, but there's this culture of writing online articles right now where people are just paying freelancers $10 to write an online article. And they're all just kind of copying each other to where finding true verified information has become really difficult when it comes to writing and editing. So I really like to look into academic journals. EBSCO is my favorite ever. It's a wonderful source.
Right. Okay. Oh, and what about fiction? Like, say if I want to write I don't know, a thriller that takes place in the late 18th centuries. Obviously, a lot of the, even just the way how people are dressed, the environment, the house, and all that. So how do you deal with those kind of things? Or you just say this is not a area that are a period that you're specializing in, and you're not taking on these kind of jobs?
So I think you would be hard pressed to find an editor who says, I specifically edit 1870s historical romances in Scotland. That's not really something that exists. When it comes to historical fiction, a huge burden of fact checking falls on the author. It is a research intensive genre when you're going in to write. However, I'm insane when it comes to historical fiction. I have way too much research all the time. My back wall looks like I'm trying to find a murderer. I mean, there's just like strings and pins everywhere. So my suggestion, and this is what I do with my own writing, is to find a local professor or someone like that in that genre or in that specialty who will read over your book and just let them note things that jump out as incorrect or inconsistencies. They may even make suggestions to improve that writing. Sometimes they'll do it for free because they think it's super cool and they just want their name in the back of the book as a contributor. Sometimes they do charge, but I will tell you that professors are usually very excited when someone comes to them out of nowhere and says, I'm interested in the things you know. Will you be a part of my book? They love it.
CJ mentioned how she is really not into line editing.
Well, copy editing, really. I'm
Copy
more of
editing.
a big picture person. If you try to, I will make my best attempts at copy editing, and I can do the general copy edit stuff. But I'm pretty sure that Jana and Cori would be appalled at my copy editing at any kind of professional level. They would be like, no, CJ.
So this is really interesting to me because Cori, you said that's that's something that you really enjoy doing. That's something that you really like. It's like when CJ and Jenna talk to me about romance stuff, and I'm like, my eyes just glaze, and I'm like, I don't know. I mean, and I sense that if I was an editor, I suspect this is not something that I'm going to enjoy doing. What is in there? Like, why do you like it?
Well, I like line editing because I love to deconstruct sentences, but I just like to deconstruct things in life. Like if I could probably pick a dream job outside of editing, it would be to peel pomegranates because it's like a tedious little thing that I do with my hands.
I wasn't expecting you to pull that out there. That's awesome.
Nobody does. Guys, honestly, like I have a goal in life to peel a pomegranate without popping a single seed, and I've gotten down to 2. That's as good as I've gotten. But
that's impressive.
Thank you. I enjoy the tedious breaking down of things and that little specific work. So I think it really has a lot to do with how your brain works. Developmental editing, I can do it, but it's the hardest one for me. I'm not an abstract thinker. I am literally good when I'm focused on small things. And so we just all kind of naturally fall into what we're good at.
Yeah, which makes me think that's not tedious for you. That's just,
No.
it's very detail oriented. Copy edits is all about that detail oriented. It's about reading a sentence 3 times and deciding where does the comma go based on how does it sound when you read it out loud and you pause in each of these 3 different places, and then how does that connect to the technical structure. So it's just about that. That's just detail work. And like you say, editors have lots of different brains, and so we do some different things. So I want to turn this just a little bit. We have lots of listeners that do various things with authors and that kind of thing, but I am guessing, and I you can prove me wrong in the comments if y'all want to, that we probably have some folks out there who are also interested in becoming editors, or maybe at least dabbling at it. So if you had somebody who approached you and says, okay, I've decided I really want to get into this whole editing thing, what advice would you give them as far as where do they start? Do they need to go to school like you did? What do they do to get into this career? Because if they've got the same kind of mind you do, if they like those details, if they like deconstructing things, where do you start?
What I would say to someone with no editing experience is to join a creative writing workshop. It's where everybody starts, school or not. Get a feel for if you really enjoy looking through other people's work and picking out what works, what doesn't, and being constructively, critical. There is a difference between saying this sucks and this could be better and this is how, or we could maybe go this direction. And you learn those skills through workshopping. So I would start with a creative writing workshop. You do not have to go to school to become an editor, at least not a 4-year degree. It's nice if you want to. If not, there are a gajillion and a half editing certifications you can get online. Some of them are 2-year degrees, some of them are 6 weeks. So you could always start off with a lesser investment with the lesser time frame figure out the smaller editing jobs that you want to give it a try. And then you can move up later if you want to and go to a bigger editing school or focus on certain ones or certain types of editing. I'd say most people start with proofreading. That's usually the standard beginner.
Well, no, I have no intention of becoming one, just in case you.
It's
Yeah,
okay,
that's all
Virginia.
right.
You know enough editors that
Sure.
you don't need to.
Do we have any other closing questions for Cori? We've been making her talk for, at least 40 minutes here. Any last things that you were just pondering and must know before we allow her to leave our presence?
I think I just want to know what animal did she see in the wood the other night. I'm not convinced it was a deer, but anyway.
It was 4 deer. It was 4 sets of glowing eyes.
Yeah, but how do you know there are deer's glowing eyes? Maybe there are bears or.
Well, one, I turned on a spotlight because when you live in the woods, you have a spotlight. That's one of your survival kits, and saw all the deer. And 2, we've only seen 1 bear track here. So if we suddenly saw 4 sets of eyes, we're having a really rapid population boom, and I might want to call the wildlife service.
This just cemented the fact that I'm never going to visit Cori ever.
All right, ladies. Well, we've already done a few off-roads into irrelevancy, but let's hit our irrelevant moment of the show, because this is one of our favorite things. All right, CJ, what is completely and utterly irrelevant in your life today?
So this morning I thought I used shampoo. I did not when I was washing my hair. Apparently the girls were experimenting with glue, and that's unfortunate because the glue, I mean, so they want to make slime, right? And you make slime with glue, and they happened to refill a shampoo bottle with the glue, and it was colored and tinted just enough to look like my shampoo. So I just want you guys to know that when washing one's hair with glue, I mean, first of all, hopefully you would notice the consistency issues. I mean, I didn't, because I'm everywhere, apparently. I mean, the ditzy was out in style when I was washing my hair this morning. But second, it's like, man, that stuff ain't totally easy to get out. And then when you do get it out and you're trying to wash your hair with the right kind of shampoo, I mean, one day I will write about this, but I'm just still so traumatized. I'm not sure how to process everything. So check your shampoo, just in case your kids thought they'd make slime and used your shampoo bottle. Just do it. Just do it.
That is excellent and painful advice. All right, Virginia, what's going on in your latest saga?
Because I'm going to give the tennis outfit a break. And because since, we started with animals, wildlife, I think it's just appropriate to close with animals and wildlife. So we have a beautiful zoo, Sydney Taronga Zoo, beautiful, best real estate ever in Sydney, like with a great view. And it just happened that 1 adult lion and 5 cubs escaped from their enclosure 2 days ago.
Goodness.
And there's I shouldn't be laughing because it could have ended really bad. And there's a thing with the zoo where you can actually stay and sleep over, and then you can, feed animals in the morning, and you can hear them roar and do their thing at night. Or I don't know. And then very early on that morning, there's this massive alarm because there's 5 lions that just going around for free in the zoo. So no one got hurt. That's what I'm talking about it. But I thought that was a good fact to share. So that was
fantastic.
To go visit Cori after that happened in your backyard, basically.
Oh, for real?
No, we talk about it. We talk about the fact that Australia is all this beautiful landscape, blah, 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 but it's also like, land of the most deadly animals and insects on planet Earth, on land and in the sea. So
Yeah.
I'm doomed. I'm doomed. I don't need to go to Korea to die. I can just stay here and it will eventually come to me. Just so I can just wait. And then, one day you might just be like, oh, where she is. No,
No.
there's a lot of options. Python strangled by a spider,
Sharks.
sharks,
You're right. Death
blue
by shark.
bottles,
Okay.
lions eaten in the zoo. Who knows? Like that's my
Nice.
Wow.
Nice. Well, I will add to that because since we've talked about that a couple of times now, I went and looked up one of my favorite things, which is the set of posts from various people on the internet called Earth is Space Australia. And it's all these little snippets of stories that people have written based on the idea that eventually different kinds of aliens find Earth and discover that Earth is full of things that just want to kill them. And not the humans, but everything else that, they land in Canada and they meet moose. And the humans are insane because we've just learned how to live with all of this. And so there's all these little snippets of aliens coming and trying to deal with Earth's wildlife and finally deciding that Earth is Space Australia, where it is full of crazy things that can kill you and crazy people who are probably prisoners. And so if you ever want just a really good laugh, go look up, because this is bounced around between different social media sites. So there were some on Tumblr and there's some in the archives. But if you Google Earth is Space Australia, you will find all of these stories out there about what would really happen if aliens came to Earth and ran into swans and moose and scorpions and all of the things in Australia. Kangaroos, there's a really good one on kangaroos. And how all the Earthlings just stand back and go, yeah, don't do that. Don't honk. Yeah, I told him not to bother the swan because, swans will kill you dead. So there's my thing.
The beginning of your next book,
It might be.
Earth and with the encounter between the aliens and the deadliest animals and insects on Earth. And what's that?
Yep.
When you're getting the what's a prestigious fiction book award?
The Hugos.
Okay, when you get
it's got to be genre based, so that'd have to be Hugos or Nebulas or something.
When you get your Hugo thing,
Space Australia.
I will not be here today without the brilliant mind that
started it all. Yeah. Because when Virginia talks about your award, she's really talking about her contribution to your award.
my friend and muse.
You don't.
All right, Cori, please save us from ourselves. Share a short, irrelevant moment, and then we are going to close this thing out.
Okay, well, I heard you guys asking Dane, and so I've been thinking about this a lot. I recently discovered that baby carrots are a lie. They are just shaved down normal carrots soaked in chemicals to stay fresh.
No, no, I do not accept this.
It's true, and it hurts my heart, but it is real.
So baby carrots just don't appear out of the ground as baby carrots, huh?
No. You ever wonder why you never seen a baby carrot with a top on? Because they're just like shaved down real carrots.
This is a challenge accepted. Challenge accepted. On the next episode, everyone, I'll bring you a baby carrot with the hair on top.
That's just a little carrot that hasn't grown yet. It's not the same as you buy in the bag that they spray with chemicals. Those are shaved down, grown carrots, and I'm hurt. I feel betrayed.
And I don't know that fries are coming from potatoes, right?
That's completely different.
They don't call them baby potatoes.
Exactly. We understand that.
Sure they do. They call them tater tots.
Oh, well, that is it. But they also
fair.
That's misinformation. We cannot have that.
All right, guys.
Facebook will flag it.
Yes, help us in the comments on YouTube if you have any information about baby carrots being, are they real or are they not? We would be happy to hear your opinion on it. We'll also put in a link to Earth is Space Australia. I'll find some of my favorites and link them in there because that's always a great link for the show notes. Cori, thanks so much for joining us. We had a great time. So
Same
as for
here.
everybody else out there, thank you so much for joining us. You can find the show in the show notes at www.atlantumdigital.com and follow the podcast on YouTube or your favorite podcast distributor. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and leave us a review. See y'all later.
Bye for now.
Bye.